Hello, everyone. Welcome to my brand new podcast. My name is Brandon, and I will be host for the Afterlife Podcast. This is basically one where I just talk about topics that interest me, serious ones that I'm passionate about, and much more. And you'll see that later down the line. But hello there. Yes, I go by the name Ghastnote, and or that's because it is my music channel, link in the description, and pretty much it's just a little nice hobby that I like to consider, which I do want to make out of my career. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today as my introduction to this channel: how to start a music career and how to be into it. Because the number one thing that could happen with it is lack of determination for it, which is what I hear a lot. The one reason that I hear for giving up an instrument, for giving up vocals, for giving up whatever it may be, I hear, my teacher just wasn't a good one. I only did like 1 or 2 lessons, then my parents took me out, whatever it may be. And that's okay. If you're, if whatever happens to your instrument gets sold, if it breaks or whatever, then fine. Maybe start a new one. Maybe find an alternative. Go virtual. Why not? Do something to keep you in the mood for it. Because that affects when you want to play. That affects your schedule. That affects how much effort you really want to put into it. Because the reality of it is very easy to lose that, and it's very easy to find your way out of music and do something else, which is cool. You don't even have to do music. Anything in the art industry kind of applies to that logic, except with every single new thing comes a new challenge. For art, it's I'd probably say for art it's just how good is your drive to finish whatever you're starting. Because what I do, whenever I draw something, but I never ever complete it. And if I do complete it, it was either a school project, there was a deadline, or just something that was very rushed. And that's the funny part. Because for me, I'm the type of person to be very productive when there's a deadline. And I don't recommend making a deadline for yourself necessarily, but what I do recommend is finding a way to experience whatever you want. Experience your career, your hobby, and try to make it as fun as possible. You don't want to relate it to something like school, because when you do that, it's just not fun. It's just the passion for it is just gone. And whenever you want to do a live performance, whenever you want to do something live, it's just very concerning, because it's like, well, what I do now, because this is all that I'm going to do. I'm going to be either drawing my whole life, performing, dancing, whatever it may be, maybe singing even. And a lot of the times it really just depends the circumstances you're given. If you have poor audio, not many people are going to listen to you, which is true to an extent. Sometimes they can still support you, but other times they'll be like, maybe I'll start supporting you once you have good audio, or just whatever the problem may be. And that's okay. Challenges like that are ones you're going to face when doing music. Challenges like that are the ones that I think people should look forward to. Because what's the point of doing a job if there's no challenge to it? If everything's easy, then it gets boring and it gets stale after a while. And you don't want that. When you do something you love and it starts to fade out into the fun, that's when it just gets to a breaking point and you want to do something else. So what I would rather do, make a schedule a bit of, I do my music stuff, then I do boring stuff, so that when I do the music, it becomes fun and it's worth it. Because that's the funny part. A line that I always like is, you gotta have the lows to appreciate the highs. I think that applies very hard into art, into anything you want to do. Because the reality of it is, if you do a dumb challenge, it can be very entertaining. It can be interesting. Let's say, for example, you do a drawing blind challenge, hey, it might look stupid, it might look dumb, but I mean, was it fun? That's the question you got to ask yourself when doing it, because once you lose that fun and once your friends start seeing that, it's nothing anymore. The job, it's just a job. It's just something you want to do for business. That's okay. You could think about it as a business, but more often than not, it's something that you should feel like you want to do instead of others telling you that you should do it. It's something you want. It's something you don't want people to control your career over, because it's going to be either the rest of your life, it's going to stick with you, and you're not going to feel happy about it. Which leads to the number one thing that's very important is patience. Patience is probably the number one helper for anything like that, for any job even, but mainly for art. Because it could take you 15 years to start to be recognized by a lot of people. It could take you a major amount of time for people to start noticing your music. Some of your ideas may be bad up until that point, but once it's good, you can pick yourself up and you could keep on going instead of saying, okay, this is the stopping point, this is the best I'm going to get. Because when you lose your patience, you start to make irrational decisions. You start to make incompetent decisions, and that's not what you want to do. When you have the patience, you may take things a little bit too slow, or too slow to some people, but I'd say I'd rather expect something that's good but that takes a long time than do something very quickly but is very poor in quality. That happens a lot with a lot of people. People can see when that happens. And even if you build your own community, it can be very, very hard to convince them to stay. And that's fine. You may lose a couple of supporters. People may be like, maybe I could support someone else. That's okay. Some people... Oh, actually, that's a very important lesson too. People, fans, whatever it may be, they may come and go. Some people might stop listening to you. Some people may go back to listening to you, and a lot of people might stay. And that's good. You want to have that portion that stays with you. Doesn't matter if it's only like 10 people. Doesn't matter if it's only less than, let's just say 20, because 20 people is already a big number when you think about it. People nowadays, they misinterpret that when they say, oh, you only have like 7 subscribers or something. No, well, screw those people. Maybe those 7 are your most important friends. Maybe you want them to be the only supporters that you have. Because the reality of it is, when you start to get big, you start to be a little more disconnected to your audience. And that's not what you want to happen. Because when you're doing that, it starts to fade into the career portion, and it starts to fade into what I previously discussed before, with everything becoming stale. And that's the funny part. Your audience really helps you a lot, more than you take for granted, more than you think, because they are the main people that's going to set off your career. They are the main people that's going to start it. The main reason that it might kick off may be because of your talent and skill, but other than that, it's pretty much the community's job to bring it up. The community's job to tell you, hey, you should keep on going for the greater good. And I think that comes a long way, especially when you have multiple years of practice. It can definitely pay off most of the time. Others say that it's a waste, which I disagree. I think it's just the way you use it. Because time and effort is just something that's pretty difficult when it comes to anything. Whether it be with your job and career, whether it be with your interest, your school, whatever it may be, it can be applied to music. It can be applied to art. And that's the funny part. Art is very risky in terms of career. In terms of, it's not determined that, hey, you're going to get a lot of money, you're going to be famous. Because sometimes it can be a curse to be famous. Because whatever you do, whatever you put out there, like this podcast, for example, it stays. People will know. There's no erasing that from the internet. Once it's on, that's it. It could be re-uploaded if people wanted to. People could I don't know, reverse reverse search whatever podcast, whatever, anything you want, really, any music you have. What's rare to find is deleted stuff, deleted content. And that's the funny part, because you gotta review your deleted content and be like, this was garbage, why did I waste my time? Or you can take that reviewed content, that deleted stuff, and fix it. Now, it doesn't even have to be fixed exactly. It could just be improved, and that's okay. That's decent enough. But you don't want to aim for decent enough. You want to keep on going, because when you keep on going, it can turn into something that's very big. Other people could be interested and be like, hey, I want to collab with you. And it's just something that should be accounted for, I feel like, when doing that type of stuff. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't exactly recommend music sometimes, but more often than not, if it's very easy to see when people are actually willing to, because without willpower to do it, it's just whatever. It's just meh. You get this feeling of, how can I put this? Because it's not the same feeling as before where everything is stale. It's like you can tell when lack of motivation can affect them and their future. And that's when you want to look out for the future. Because once you do something in the past that does involve music, it can change your life. Maybe you could get an Oscar for whatever song you did in the past that you thought wasn't good enough. And that's the funny part. You don't have to like your music or whatever you put out. Maybe you could be like, this wasn't a great song, and people could still support it. People could still be like, hey, that's not your worst. I'm sure there's worse out there, or whatever their reasons may be for still supporting you. They're still going to be there. And that's something you want to rely on. You want to rely on them, because when you rely on them for opinions, it can be like, thanks for the advice, thanks for the support. Now, don't get me wrong. When you have bad opinions, when you have hateful comments and stuff, that's the stuff you don't want to ignore, but you want to consider. That's the stuff you want to pay attention to. Maybe not the most, but at least put a little with people that are actually trying to give you constructive criticism, because there's a difference between just being hateful and be like, you suck, whatever, and harsh criticism. Sometimes that's what you need. It's not going to be easy out there. When people tell you that, you have it set, not really. Maybe you play for a judge and the judge gives you a no. Maybe the judge doesn't like what you have. That's fine. People's styles are all different. And I think that's very interesting, because it's like, hey, this person made a cover. Let's just say the original song was like a heavy metal, and this person made it an acoustic. It may not translate well, but if it sounds interesting, that could be something new. That could be something that inspires others to do. And that's the funny part. Sometimes the weirdest ideas, or the most bizarre ones, are the ones that are paid attention to the most, since no one is willing to do them. That can be said for a lot of careers, but more often than not with art, it just depends how you go about it. Now, I was actually researching with a lot of videos, a lot of things that people do on America's Got Talent and all these talent shows, and you can tell when it's satire. Sometimes it is. It's not too genuine, but when it is genuine, it's like, oh, wow, I can't believe no one's ever thought about this. And that's the person that they look up. That's the person that they search up and be like, wow, I wish I could be like them. When you have someone as your idol, when you have any musician or whatever, use that to your advantage. Maybe you shouldn't exactly base your style off of theirs, because it's just not going to turn out the same. It's not going to feel the same. So to create your own style, that's where you have to start from scratch, from the basics. And using the basics really comes a long way, because it's literally the blueprints of your career. If you don't know the basics, then you're going to be a little misguided. You're going to be a little off direction as to what you're trying to aim for. Let's just say you're a horror artist and you wanted to make horror music. If you're making music that sounds like pop culture music and you somehow turn it to horror, then fine. But if you're going to use it in a certain type of context, abuse that. Make sure that context works, because when people don't like what you put out, it's going to matter a lot to your career, to your reputation, and more often than not, the way that you perceive how you do things around it. And I don't know if there's an exact effect. I don't know if there's a theory, a definition on it, because it's really hard to describe what music feels like. It's really hard to describe how people get into it, because it's like most people are probably going to tell you like, oh, I don't know, I mean, I just thought it was really cool, I just thought it was fun. And I guess sometimes that can be a really good motive, fun. Because when some hobby turns into something boring, it doesn't become a hobby anymore. It becomes a chore. It becomes something you're just not willing to do anymore. It becomes something that's just not fun. And I think out of this whole entire podcast, out of this whole entire session, that's the thing that you want to take away. Without fun, what's the point? And I can't put enough emphasis on that, because I think if you're going to do something that's worthwhile, then I'm sure it doesn't have to exactly be fun, but maybe at least interesting, or at least moment building. And when it's done with others, that's great, because you can share your experience with others. They can share their experiences with their friends and family, and so many more people could just join in, and it becomes a really great team. It becomes a really great, wholesome part, and I think that's something that should be looked forward to. Now, that's pretty much it to say for today's episode. This was a very short one, but I'm sure with other friends that I have, or with other friends that I want to bring on to my podcast, that it's going to be about more than 30 minutes. But so to recap, lesson 1, patience. Lesson 2, don't let people's opinions tell you whether or not you should continue to do music. Lesson 3, determination. Keep it, have it, you'll do great. And that's pretty much it for this episode. So thank you all so much for watching. I hope that this was very informative, and that you go check out whatever stuff I have to put out there, and you guys keep on continue to listen. My name is Gast again, and that's all for tonight, folks.